really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me here again today for another episode. This is part 2, a continuation of a conversation I started last week about the stages of consciousness and how we grow spiritually, because I think it's really important information for us to understand perhaps what has happened for us already in our lives and how we've grown, but also to help us understand other people in our lives and to be able to look at where they may be in terms of their consciousness, just so that we can understand them better. So a really quick review of some things I talked about in last week's episode. It would be helpful if you listen to that first if you haven't heard it yet. But for one thing, our growth in consciousness is much like an expansion, not so much as rising up a staircase or going up a ladder from one level to another, but these stages of consciousness that we grow through are more like a series of balloons. Think of it that way. One balloon inside another, inside another. And so as we grow from one stage to the next, it's as if our balloon expands. Our container for our consciousness grows and becomes larger so that we can see more, we can understand more, we have a bigger view of the world, a bigger view of ourselves than we had at our previous stage. We are able to take in more perspectives and have a much broader and deeper understanding of life itself and of all the processes taking place in life. And so each time we grow to a new stage of consciousness, our balloon gets bigger than it was before. And one of the principles behind this, the reason it's helpful to think of it as these concentric spheres, is because each time we grow from one stage to another, we not only transcend the stage we were in the past, but we include it. So transcend plus include. Sometimes when we grow to a new stage, we are really tired of the old stage we were in. We've actually rejected a lot of the ideas that we held on to when we were at the previous stage, and we want to leave all of them behind. But the principle of this type of growth, concentric growth and expansion, is that we need to take some of the wisdom from that previous stage with us. We can't leave all of it behind. That is like, the proverbial throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We need to bring with us the positive aspects of the previous stage and the values of that stage so that we can have them as part of our foundation when we go into a new, more expanded consciousness. And I gave an example last week of a toddler who learns how to walk, leaves behind crawling, doesn't need to crawl on the floor anymore, but is still able to crawl and can utilize crawling whenever it's helpful or necessary. So that's the idea of transcending and including. You transcend when you're able to stand upright on two legs and walk and be mobile in that way, but you don't lose the ability to crawl that you developed at the previous stage. So just to keep that in mind. So another one of the tenets that is true about spiritual growth is that you can't skip steps. Each stage is important because we learn things at each stage. We pick up things, we gain perspectives, we gain new views and values, and every stage is important in its own way. So we can't skip any of the steps. We have to go through them. It's really important, in fact, that we grow in this kind of logical, stepwise manner in a way, though it isn't it isn't in any way linear or a straight line of growth. It's all over the place, up and down. Sometimes we expand a bit into new ways of thinking, and then we go backwards for a bit. We take a few more steps forward and another step backward, and we circle around and we go in a spiral. The growth is in no way linear or straightforward, one step after another. There are many ups and downs and many meanderings in this process of growing spiritually. But the important point is, ultimately, we don't skip any of the stages or any of the steps. We do go through them in our own way. Another concept I mentioned last week is the idea that each of us comes here, we're kind of born with a spiritual set point, and our set point is the maximum stage of consciousness to which we can grow easily without doing work and without intentionally learning and intentionally expanding our knowledge and wisdom base to help us grow. So we come here with a set point, and that's why some people rather easily can reach higher states of consciousness at a younger age in life. Others grow to different levels of consciousness and may be stuck there and may, in fact, be happy to be where they are at whatever stage of consciousness they're at. And if they're going to grow more or expand their consciousness more, it's going to take inspiration and momentum and work on their part to expand. And some people may not want to grow anymore. Some people just may not have the desire to grow more. For me, myself, as a person, I can say I've always known for my entire life, I've always just wanted to know more and learn more and grow more. I've always longed for that. There's a strong drive inside of me and this curiosity about life. I want to see all of it. I want to see all the diversity. I want to understand all of these things, all the people on the planet, all the planets in the galaxy, all the galaxies in the universe. I want to see and learn and know as much as I can. That is a drive inside of me that probably comes from my set point. And I would guess if you're listening to this podcast, you may feel that drive as well. That may be something that motivates you. You're continually trying to learn more and challenge yourself and grow in many ways, but not everyone has that. So that's something we have to have compassion for. There may be people who simply don't care about growing and don't care about learning, and they may be perfectly content and living their lives to the best of their ability wherever they are and have no desire to move in a certain direction or to grow or expand or learn more or see more. So we can't judge that. We have to accept that. If we are people who are motivated to learn and grow, that's great. But other people may not be, and that's great for them as well. So we have to learn how to accept the fact that each of us we are just where we are, where we are in life and where we are with our spiritual growth, and not waste our time judging other people for where they are. We have to leave their journey to them and assume that they'll do the best they can do. And we're not really responsible for other people's journeys, but it's great if we can love other people and show compassion and acceptance and tolerance, because that might be helpful to them. So those are some of the concepts that I wanted to remind you about, that I talked about in more depth last week, but important things to remember as we talk about the stages. So yes, we didn't even get into the 4 stages that I want to describe to you here. So that is what today's conversation will mostly be about, talking about these 4 stages of spiritual development. Now, there are many more than 4, but these 4 stages are the dominant 4 stages that are present in our world right now, particularly our society here in the U.S., although the 4th stage I'll talk about is rather rare. And so we need more, much more of that stage. So I'm going to start with what is called the traditional stage. And this is a stage that is the hallmark of it is the desire to fit in. And much of our world right now consists of people who are at the traditional stage. This traditional stage is focused on being part of a group, a member of a community, and fitting into that community. The desire at the traditional stage is to find safety, certainty, and security. And those things are all found within membership in a certain group or belonging to a community or a group. And so the group itself provides structure, provides rules, tells people how to live. There is a leader of the group who is an authoritarian that everyone in the group agrees to follow and listen to and to take direction from. So these groups could be religious groups, churches, or any other type of religion that people decide to belong to, and that give up some of their own free will and independence in order to be part of this religious group and to follow the belief system and the tenets and the rules and the dogma of that religion. Within this religion, however, the belief is that only my religion is true. Only the religion I'm following or believe in is right. Everyone else is wrong. So anyone outside this group membership is suspicious and is thought of as someone who has gone the wrong way, who doesn't understand, who hasn't learned, who's not part of the chosen group. So there's a big benefit to being part of a group like this because the ego gets a boost in terms of believing that I'm part of the special group that has been chosen, that's above all the other groups, and we're better than any other group. It also takes away some personal responsibility for decision making because decisions are made by the leader of the group or the people who have made the rules for the group. Decisions are made outside of the individual person. Individuals are not necessarily responsible for their own behavior because they don't trust themselves to make their own decisions or to make their own rules. So they ascribe to and cling to the rules of the group. Whatever the group has decided is the right thing, that's what I will do. Now, so I described one example of a group at this traditional level is a religion, but there can be other groups as well. Sometimes corporations behave in this traditional manner. So people who work for a corporation may find themselves in kind of an authoritarian dominator hierarchy where they have to follow the rules that have been set down, and there really isn't much space or room for individuals to think for themselves or make their own decisions. There can be other groups as well, sometimes fans of a sports team. There can be, if you think about it, there can be lots of other groups that can form that have these fairly rigid rules and that don't allow for much individualism. You have to dress a certain way, you have to talk a certain way and say certain things, you have to believe certain things, and you follow the rules and you go along with what the group tells you is the right thing to do. And so people within this traditional stage of consciousness, not only do they believe whatever religious beliefs they happen to have are the best and the only religion, but also their country, their family, the larger groups that they belong to as well are the best, are exceptional, are better than any other group, any other country, any other nation, any other community. They belong to the best. And so at this level also, often the leader of the group is someone revered by all the members of the group and someone who is above criticism. It's not really acceptable to be critical or doubtful of the leader. There's a certain amount of just blind faith and acceptance of whoever the leader is and following what the leader prefers and what the leader suggests that people do. Again, because there's a de-emphasis on critical thinking or analyzing things or making decisions from within the self, because the individual self is not recognized as being important or having value. So this is a stage of consciousness that all of us pass through at one time or another in our lives, and some of us, many of us, stay at this traditional stage of consciousness. And you know people in your life right now, I'm sure, who are at this stage of consciousness and who may feel very comfortable there. They may feel very safe because that's one of the positive aspects of the traditional level of consciousness. It provides a lot of safety in being a member of this group. And so some of you may have gone through this stage and transcended it and perhaps included some of it in your new stage. And again, you may know people who are at that stage. And remember, I mentioned last week, at each stage of consciousness, the members of that stage of consciousness tend to dislike people at all the other levels of consciousness, at all the other stages. There's a lot of animosity between these levels, which is one of the problems we're facing in our society right now. So there's a distrust of people who are at other levels. So we're going to move on to the next level. If you leave this traditional level, and this happens, sometimes people were raised in a particular group, adhering to that group's beliefs and customs, and then reach a certain age when it no longer fits them. They no longer value or care about the things that they cared about as a member of the group. They desire something more. And that is what happens as you move toward the next stage, which is the rational stage, which is an individualistic stage. And so the traditional stage is a group-focused or we stage. Rational, the next stage, is a me stage where the emphasis is on growing as an individual, finding out who you are, what are you here for, what are your talents and your gifts, what is your own unique special path in the world, what are you here to contribute to the world and to provide. And when you begin to have that consciousness and that desire to explore your own pathway in the world, the traditional group that you have been a member of can't support that very well. It's very threatening to that group that an individual would stand up and say, but wait, I want to think about these issues for myself. I want to make my own decisions. I want to get educated on this instead of just accepting what another person tells me I should think. I would like to make up my own mind. I'm going to read things. I'm going to study and learn and come to my own conclusion about things. But that new attitude, this new expanded idea of being an individual in the world is very threatening to anyone who is happy and content at the traditional level. So those who come from perhaps a family that's very traditional have to go through a lot of pain and alienation sometimes in order to break away from that family, to move into the rational stage and become themselves as individuals. Now, the rational stage has many different hallmarks. The rational stage in terms of the development of civilization and society, with the rational stage of consciousness came the Enlightenment, science, medicine, discoveries, but also business and capitalism, success, achievement, greed, selfishness. So it's a mixed bag. There were many positive things that arise at this level of rational consciousness, but also some dark side to it as well. Every stage has its dark side. And so the rational stage tends to be more tolerant of other individuals because individualism is valued at this stage of consciousness. I'm an individual. I think the way I think. It's okay that other people think how they think too. It's okay that other people are learning about things and having opinions and making up their minds as well. In terms of spirituality, this rational stage of consciousness is often marked by agnosticism or atheism, because people who come into the rational stage many times have left behind a religion that may have been very rigid or dogmatic. And in order to grow as an individual, you may have to totally leave behind all of those beliefs, everything that was related to the religion that you came from. And so it's normal during this rational phase of consciousness development to actually question and doubt whether there is a God at all, and whether or not you want or need to have any sort of spiritual beliefs or practices in your life. And that is a normal stage. But think about how threatening that is to a traditional family, to have a family member who suddenly wants to leave behind all of the religious beliefs or political beliefs or whatever belief system the family has clung to and depended upon, to have an individual who says, no, I don't believe any of that anymore. I don't want that. I don't want those practices anymore. I don't want to associate with those people anymore. I'm finding a new path. I'm finding my own way, and it's nothing like where I came from. So you can understand that in the eyes of those who are still at the traditional level of consciousness, it appears that the person who's moved into rational, an expanded stage of consciousness, has actually gone backwards, is actually what they call a backslider, who lost their belief and lost their faith, and they have to be rescued and saved because they can't perceive that there is anything beyond the belief system that they hold on to. They can't imagine it. They cannot even perceive it because the balloon of their consciousness is too small. There's not room in their consciousness for the rational point of view. And they haven't expanded to that point, and they simply can't see it. So all they can imagine is that anyone they know who has left behind the dogmatic teachings that they love and cling to and feel happy with has gone backwards and is in trouble, and it has become a bad person or has been influenced negatively. They cannot even imagine or consider that this is actually a sign of growth, and that the person that they love who is leaving them behind is actually growing in consciousness and actually developing the capacity to be an even happier, more expanded, more content person in their own lives. They can't see it, and they won't see it unless they themselves are able to expand their own consciousness. And so if you listening have had this exact experience of growing beyond the traditional group that you were raised in, you may have come into your rational stage of consciousness feeling very much isolated and alone, rejected by all the people that used to love you and care for you, all the people that judged you. But it's important to recognize they simply can't do anything differently than that. They're afraid for you. They think that you're in danger and that you will be harmed. They are not able to see that this is a good thing. This is really good for you. They may be able to reckon with that over time and to begin to see that it's okay, particularly if they have the capacity to grow a little bit. But it makes sense that you might be feeling all alone as you're out there in the world, figuring out who you are and what your own path through the world is. And I mentioned set point before. that we each come here with our own set point, which is the level of consciousness that we are likely to reach without very much effort. So it's very possible to be an individual with a higher set point, born into a family and a group who exist at a lower set point. When that happens, the person with the higher set point is viewed as maybe the black sheep of the family, as the one who doesn't fit in, the one who doesn't seem to get it or understand what we're doing. And that individual may have been repressed for much of their life, not able to talk about what they see or what they understand or what matters to them. They may have to hide all of those feelings inside because no one else around them is able to tolerate that or able to accept that about them. And so if you're someone with a higher set point who was born into a group at a lower set point, who is very happy and content to be where they are, it may have slowed down your own progress toward your set point because you didn't have any support. In fact, you had a lot of obstacles to growing to your set point and reaching your set point. You had a lot of people pushing you and holding you down. So it may have taken a lot of effort to break free from that repression and to come into yourself in a way, to become who you really are and find yourself at this rational level of consciousness. And so one thing that happens at the rational level, where science prevails, where logical thinking and critical thinking prevails, just using your own mind to learn and study and reason things out, is that religion is suspect because the religion of the traditional level teaches that you shouldn't think for yourself. You can't trust yourself. You can't trust your own thoughts. You should only listen to those outside of you who can tell you what to think or how to feel about things. And at this level also, the rational mindset has a very hard time with any type of spirituality, which appears to be the same thing as religion. And I'm here to say that it's not, but at the rational level, they appear to be the same. They both appear to be suspect. And when you've been harmed or injured by being part of a religion, perhaps the last thing that you're interested in or want in your life is spirituality, which looks like it could be religion, just wearing different clothes. There are differences, and I think there are big differences, but it's very hard to see those differences at the rational level. So it makes sense at the rational level, we tend to reject both religion and spirituality and not want either one in our lives. Many people expand to the rational level of consciousness and then stay there. That feels like a good place to them. They're comfortable. They're content at that level. It makes sense to them. Their lives are in order and everything seems to fit. But it's also possible to grow through the rational level and to begin to expand beyond the rational so that you reach a point where even the promises of the rational level start to not make total sense and start to let you down. And where it may feel like you need something more, there's something beyond this level. Where I have seen this happen has been when people develop a serious illness or face some other type of disaster or hardship in life, and suddenly find that science doesn't have any answers for them. Science can't be helpful. They go through every scientific possibility that's out there or solution, but nothing is helpful. And they are lacking a belief system or a mindset that helps them cope or helps them navigate the hardships that they're going through, because disaster, illness, death, hardships, those are not rational experiences. When you have an experience like that, there's nothing rational about it. You can't explain why it happened. You can't find a reason for it. It simply happened in your life and you don't know why. And so suddenly the rational mindset and perspective does not have an answer for where you are and what has happened for you. And that pushes you into a place where you need to expand again. You need to expand your consciousness, and you need to be able to see things from a bigger, broader, and deeper perspective. So oftentimes when people reach the end of rational, it is because something disastrous happens in their lives that they simply can't cope with. And that event is the catalyst that pushes them to expand into the next level of consciousness that we'll talk about now, which is called the pluralistic level, sometimes called the postmodern level, and also called the sensitive level. So at this level of consciousness, the pluralistic level, once again, is another group-focused, we-focused level of consciousness. So we've gone from we at the traditional level of being kind of fused to a group to me at the rational level, developing and blossoming and exploring yourself as an individual, back to another communal focus of connectedness at the pluralistic level. It's not the fusion that existed at traditional level. It's something different. It's a choice to see the humanity of all other groups of people and to see that we're connected. We are all one. All people, we're all one. We all have similar desires in life. We all experience similar issues. We're all similar in so many ways, and we feel connectedness with other people, but not fusion as in a group think where we're told how to think. We have an increased capacity to accept people who are different from us and to even appreciate them and to value them. We become aware of the suffering of other people. For the first time, we're able to truly see that and actually feel pain ourselves when we know that someone else is suffering. Now, what's interesting is that the traditional level for all of the talk in very fundamentalistic religion about being my brother's keeper or whatever, does not really have the capacity to have that degree of compassion for others. There's compassion for other people within its own group, but it's a big stretch to care very much about anyone who's outside the group. If someone outside the group is suffering, they probably deserve it. They deserve it because they're not a member of our group. They didn't figure out how to get into our group. That's why they're suffering. So there's a lack of genuine compassion at that traditional level. But at the pluralistic level, there is real compassion and real concern for other people, for the environment, for animals, for ecosystems and plant life. There's genuine concern for other parts of the world, for people that you've never met before, that you don't even know. But when you recognize that they are suffering and they have issues, you connect to them as humans who are experiencing challenges on the planet and have concern and compassion for them. So at the pluralistic level, it's very common and natural to be pro-immigration and to want to see refugees have a place to come and stay and to help them and give them jobs and give them housing and be kind to them. It is natural to want to support homeless people and provide meals for them, to make sure to try to help get them off the street. This is where many of our nonprofit and charitable causes begin, is with this pluralistic notion of, I'm here to help others. I have to. I'm connected to them. They're part of me. I can't be whole if they're not whole. I need to help them and help them rise up to better conditions. And those at rational and traditional levels of consciousness often see people at the pluralistic level as being foolish and silly. Like, why do you care about those other people? Why would you spend your money trying to help someone else? It doesn't make any sense to them. It doesn't fit with how they see the world and how they view things. So if you're at this pluralistic level, your heart tells you to care for others and to do kind things for other people. And yet here are people that you know who are close to you who simply don't understand it or don't agree with you, or who actually accuse you of doing something wrong in the world by trying to help people that are not part of their group and part of their worldview. At the pluralistic level, also, we tend to become more open to spirituality that is not necessarily connected to any one religion, but to ideas like meditation and yoga, ideas like going within, like trying to heal our wounds, like looking at our own shadow, like doing things to help us become better people in a spiritual sense, learning how to love better, learning how to forgive. And so it's a spiritual focus that is not tied to any one religion, but may actually borrow little elements from many different religions, and may be looking to the wisdom texts of many religions to learn about these universal ancient truths that have been handed down. So for the first time, these lessons and teachings are not as threatening as they were at the rational level, because it's possible to see, some of these teachers themselves who may have grown up in a certain religion were actually much more mystical in their thinking. They weren't limited by the religion itself. They were teaching lessons like love your neighbor, love your enemy, and forgiveness that have a much broader sense, not the narrow sense in which they were taught at the traditional level. So at the pluralistic level, there does tend to be an openness to spirituality, sometimes a questioning of science and rationality, because when you get to pluralistic, oftentimes you've seen that science doesn't always have answers for everything. Science can't necessarily explain everything. So at the pluralistic level, there's kind of a new questioning and perhaps suspicion of science. So the pluralistic people and traditional people align sometimes in questioning and doubting science. And we saw this happen over the COVID pandemic, doubting vaccines and mask wearing and questioning all of the recommendations of science. It was coming from both the traditional level and also from this pluralistic level of people. So one issue that happens at the pluralistic level, because it's wonderful, this sensitivity and caring for everyone, but there is a lack of discernment at this level. And so at the pluralistic level, sometimes, like in organizations that are being operated from this level of consciousness, there's an inability to decide to, we're going to focus on this one cause. There's often a desire to support everything and focus on everything. And so the efforts that are made at this level can get diluted out because we're taking on too much. We care about everything. So we're trying to show up at every single organization, and we're trying to give money to every single cause that we care about. And yet we can't give enough to have any kind of impact anywhere, because we haven't been able to discern what would be the best use of my energy and time and money, and to sort out and select one thing, one cause, one group to support. So, and in fact, there's a fear of choosing any one group over another. And so that is sometimes where at the pluralistic level, people may spin around and around again in circles because it's very hard to decide how to choose one step forward and the best thing to do. And there's often a lot of disagreement between people at that level about which cause is the most important. What should we back? Where should we try to make a difference? Things get stalled out and stuck because no one can choose one cause over another. And so there's, as I said, this dilution of energy and effort and concern, trying to spread it too thin over every single marginalized group and every single cause that exists. And then oftentimes nothing gets done because no one can agree together on what's the most important thing to do. So these three levels I've described so far, traditional, rational, and pluralistic, make up the vast majority of our society here in the US, where I live, but also in most Western countries. And the fact is, each one of these levels hates the other two levels. There's a lot of conflict and disagreement. People at each level believe they are at the best level possible and they are right in how they see things, and that those who think differently, who have the consciousness of the other levels, are completely wrong. And so that's an issue for us right now, that there are a lot of battles and conflicts going on back and forth between these three levels. And it is causing a lot of polarization in our society and an inability to solve problems and to move forward and to sort things out and figure things out. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk about it, is because the more we're aware of it, the more we can see where we fit in, where are we in terms of our own individual consciousness, where are the people we love and care about. Perhaps we've had conflicts with people we love because they're at a different level of consciousness than we are. And we might even feel that things are hopeless and that we're not ever going to solve any of our problems or move forward because of this divisiveness. Now, there's a fourth level of consciousness, which is where I hope we are all moving toward, and this is the integral level of consciousness. And I see that I've really gone over time quite a bit today. I'll tell you just a little bit about integral consciousness, which is a big step above pluralistic, beyond pluralistic, big expanded view. It's sometimes called the mystical view, but at the integral level, we become aware of the entire spiral of our development. We're able to see for the first time all of the other levels of consciousness that we ourselves have progressed through. We're able to see and understand the role each one of those levels plays in our society, why they're all important, why everyone belongs. Everyone being in it wherever they are is okay, because everyone contributes something at whatever level they're at. And for the first time, we're able to recognize how we grow. So I'm presenting this entire picture to you from this integral mindset of how we grow through these stages of consciousness. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see that, because this is giving you an integral glimpse at the world. There's a huge amount of hope here, because actually from the integral perspective, there is a way to solve problems. There is a way to move forward and make a better world for ourselves. But we have to get to this integral level of consciousness in order to truly work on it, in order to pull ourselves out of these culture wars and the battles that are happening back and forth between traditional, rational, and pluralistic levels in our society. We have to be able to pull ourselves away from that and get a bigger, higher perspective. That's the only way we'll be able to solve problems. So I'm going to make this a 3-part series now and come back next week and talk more about integral and what to expect at integral and how to get ourselves there. But I wanted to share with you a verse that came from Rumi that I think is applicable to our desire to grow. And Rumi says, No mirror ever became iron again. No bread ever became wheat. No ripened grape ever became sour fruit. Mature yourself and be secure from a change for the worse. Become the light. And so what he's saying is that when we grow, we are not going to go backwards. We really can't. We can't go backwards to that more shrunken level of consciousness where we used to be. And we have to learn to not be afraid to grow, to not be afraid to keep expanding in the world. And Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "For things to reveal themselves to us, we need to be ready to abandon our views about them." And so that's part of putting aside our fear of change and growth and be ready to abandon how we thought things were, how we thought things worked, what we thought was the best, in order to chart a new course here, an integral course. So I wanted to say those before I say goodbye. And so come back next week and we'll talk much more about the integral stage of consciousness. So until next week, remember that we're here for love. So that's always the bottom line for me. Just remember love, because you can't go wrong if you work toward bringing more love into the world. Face your fear. Be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your precious life. Bye-bye.